He's like, I don't know if you believe in God. And I was like, yeah, I believe in God, but I don't know who he is. Like, I don't know if he really exists. Like, I know that that's what I'm told to do. I'm being told every day that I have to pray to him, but how do I know he exists? I mean, he might not even exist. And he was like, well, he's brought you through some pretty rough times. I mean, you lost both of your parents. He's brought you through that. You've been in several different homes. He brought you through that. You had a charge. He brought you through that. So he was like telling me that there were so many things that God has brought me through. How can you not believe that he's real? I'm gonna take you guys back to when I was a kid. So growing up, I lived with a single mother. Her name was Carlisa McBride. She was 14 years old when she had my older sister, and then she was 16 when she had me. My dad was 4 years older than her, so the dynamic was a little bit different, but I always remember my mom kind of being like a hustler, like being a go-getter, going out there, trying to do the best that she can with what she had. I don't know how to describe my dad. Like, he was a drug dealer, very into the streets. Saw my mother. He was way older. He was 18. She was 14. He saw my mother and just kind of like wanted that to kind of be a thing, I guess. My mama was into him because of money. So like it was like a money financial thing, a security thing. So that was like a little bit about my parents. When I was 5 years old, my dad was shot and killed because of his life choices. He was very into the streets, selling drugs. So one day, someone knocked on the door. He thought it was just a customer, opened the door, and someone killed him. Fast forward 2 years later, my mother passed away to a brain aneurysm. So after my mother died, it was kind of like, what's next for me? So I ended up living with my uncle. I was with him for about a year. And then he kind of like decided one day, I need to like have my own family, explore those options. So he went ahead and started having his own family. So I ended up being shipped off to Ypsilanti to live with my grandma. It was very rough. It was very, very rough. It started with abuse by my sister. She was like always abusing me, always saying negative things about me. Fast forward from my sister, I ended up, because of everything that was going on, CPS got involved, and so I had to go and live with my aunt. So when I was living with my aunt, it wasn't picture perfect, but I had a lot to do, a lot to work on. I was at school, I was constantly fighting, arguing. There was times where I was supposed to be suspended from school because of how much I was arguing and fighting. I was just not supposed to be making. So I remember it got to graduation and they basically told me I wasn't graduating. They said, you're not graduating high school. You've been fighting too much. The attendance is not there. I was always skipping school. I started, like, at that point, I did cosmetology school. And cosmetology school was, like, my way to, like, say that I was in school. But I was really, like, once I was done with cosmetology school, I was skipping. So I wasn't showing up. So they had an issue with that. My aunt was not aware of that. So around graduation time, they were like, you're not going to graduate. Like, there's no possibility of you graduating. I was terrified. Like, that was my kind of first instance of me being terrified. And I didn't really know. Like, I grew up in a church home. I knew who God was, but I didn't really know who God was. So I kind of prayed. I was like, God, I don't know how you're going to do this. I don't know what you're going to do or how you're going to fix this, but I have to graduate. Like, there's just no way I cannot be the only person still left behind in high school. So I went to my principal and I'm like, how can I graduate? And she said, this is the things that you need to do. I think I was about a semester behind in schoolwork and I caught all that up, did all the things that I needed to do, and I was able to walk across the stage. And that was kind of like my first thing, not really first thing, but my first incident with God. I still didn't know who he was. It's still kind of like Rocky. I'm like, I know he's there, but I don't really know him like that. So I went to college. So when I went to college, I started off at Southwestern Michigan College. When I went to Southwestern Michigan College, it was in Dowagiac, Michigan, and I had to figure out what was next for me. So I didn't have much money to go to like Oakland University or anything like that. Like, I didn't have money right away to attend any fancy colleges. So I started going to Southwestern. It was a community college, but they had a campus. So it was my way of having freedom. So I started off there. I was a straight A student, a great, great student. And I started getting into arguments. So again, fast forward to how I was in high school. I was always fighting. I was known as that fighter. And I brought that to college. So I started fighting, getting into several arguments, several fights all the time. And one day, I had beef with this girl. How I was taught, not really how I was taught, but how I thought. My thinking process was, if you see somebody, it does not matter where they are, who they're with, what they're doing. If we're supposed to be fighting, we're gonna fight. So I saw this girl one day. She was at the grocery store. I was at the grocery store, saw each other, and I ran up on her and I fought her. And my friend told me to just leave. He was like, just leave. Don't even stay. The police has been called. Just leave. So I was like, okay. So I left. So I went back to my dorm, and I'm sitting in my dorm. Months go by. Things are fine. Never had an issue. I'm not calling on God because I'm not, because in my mindset was you only call on God when you're dealing with difficult situations. You don't call on him all the time. So I was only calling on him when I was dealing with situations. At that time, the police never contacted me. Nothing really happened. So one day I was on my way to Chicago to pick up one of my friends at that time, and we got pulled over. And the officer asked for everyone's license. He took the two girls, he took mine, he gave them theirs back, he told me to step out the vehicle, and at that point, that was my first interaction with the police, and I had been arrested. Well, I was charged with assault and battery because I had fought her in the grocery store, and although I did not use a weapon, my hands were considered a weapon at that point. So I was in a jail cell, and I remember just crying. I was in a room full of just people that I didn't know. I felt uncomfortable. I'm in the city I don't know anything about. I was the only black person in the jail. It was just a whole bunch going on. So I prayed. I just said, God, I don't know how you're going to get me out of the situation, because that's how my mindset was. When you're in a dark place and you're going through a hard time, you got to lean on God. So I said, God, I don't know how you're going to get me out of this situation, but please work it out. Like, that's all I said, is just please work it out. They came to me with the bond. They told me my bond was like $500. I was like, oh God, I'm stuck. My family ain't coming to pick me up. My bond is $500. Like, there's no way they're going to buy me out. So I was praying again, and eventually I ended up getting bonded out. I don't know how I got bonded out, but I got bonded out, and I remember my friend coming to pick me up, and we talked about the incident, and I was like, I don't know how I got out of this situation. I kept praying to God, and I kept asking him to help me, and I didn't feel like my prayers were being heard, but obviously they were. But again, as stubborn as I am, I kept continuing the path that I was going on. So I kept arguing, kept fighting. And eventually I was like, I got to leave this school because, this school is obviously not the environment that I need to be in. So I had, at that point, still going through the court process of that. I had been charged with disturbance of the peace. So they brought it down to, instead of assault and battery, I had been charged with disturbance of the peace. Getting that charge was like the hardest thing of my life, because I had so much going for myself. I wanted to be a lawyer. I had so many aspirations in life, things that I really wanted to do that I couldn't do. When I was applying for jobs, it was very hard for me to get a job because of that. And so I didn't know. So I started going to Oakland University, because again, I couldn't find any jobs. It was hard for me to get a job. So I was like, I just got to finish school. Like, at that point, I have to finish school. So I got a job, but I started attending Oakland University. I had got a scholarship because I was doing really well at Webster. Got a scholarship at Oakland University, and I felt like once I started attending Oakland, I really started getting closer to God when I attended there, because it was during times of COVID. So COVID was happening, and it was a lot of isolation there. So I was always praying, and I was always asking God and guiding God through a lot of stuff. And I remember going to Southwestern and going there, how is the outcome? What am I going to do? And then going to Oakland University, and there were so many opportunities that just landed in my lap. I remember I became within my first semester of being there, I was the face of Oakland University. I was just so involved. I had got opportunities that I didn't think existed, because my mind was telling me, this is all I know. You have this background, this is who you are, no one's going to want you. But God, when God has bigger plans for you, he's going to make sure that you know it. So all of these opportunities were still laying on my lap, and I just felt like a big fish in a small world, like a big fish. So I just kept praying. I found me a church home close in that area, and I started going to church more often. I remember one day I couldn't afford to buy books at school. And again, I felt like, even though I was going to church, I feel like you only call on God when you have something going on. So I couldn't afford to get books. And I remember crying to my professor. I said to him, I can't afford to get these books for this class. And he was like, okay. He's like, I don't know if you believe in God. And I was like, yeah, I believe in God, but I don't know who he is. I don't know if he really exists. I know that that's what I'm told to do. I'm being told to every day that I have to pray to him, but how do I know he exists? He might not even exist. And he was like, well, he's brought you through some pretty rough times. You lost both of your parents. He's brought you through that. You've been in several different homes. He brought you through that. You had a charge. He brought you through that. So he was telling me that there were so many things that God has brought me through. How can you not believe that he's real? And I was like, yeah, I get kind of in my head, as arrogant as I am, a little 18-year-old going like, yeah, whatever, you just talking to talk kind of mindset. And so I was upset about my books. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. He was like, what I recommend you do is just go home and pray about it. So I went home and I prayed. I got on my hands and knees and I just prayed and I said, God, I don't know if you're real, if you see me, if I've been a burden to you, but I'm asking you to help me with my books. And I remember 2 days later, somebody paid for each and every book for my class. I do not know how. I don't know if it was that professor. No one ever told me who paid for those books, but someone paid for all my books for my class. And I remember breaking down and I was like, God, you're real. Like, you're listening to me. Like, you understand what I'm saying. Like, you're not some made up person that people want you to, you're not a made up person. You're a real person. And so that always stuck with me that day, because I was like, dang, like, you heard my cries, you heard my prayers. And so from there, I kind of finished college. I finished college, did really well in college, got my first job. My first job was at UWM, so it's United Wholesale Mortgage. That was my first job straight out of college. Again, a big fish in a small world. So God was like, we was kind of like this. We weren't besties, but we was kind of close. We was building that relationship. And I was at UWM, and I remember when I first started there, I had started in mortgages. So I had got a job hired in as a mortgage underwriter because I didn't have any other experience. And secondly, when you have a degree, when you work at UWM, the first job they always offer you is a mortgage underwriter. So I remember being in the classes and everyone was like, you have such a good personality. You should be working in HR. Like, you should be doing something in HR. And I was like, yeah, but I don't know. Like, I don't know what I want to do. So I remember one day I had an apartment. It was not the best. So it had very bad reviews. It had like bed bugs review, roaches reviews. I was just in this apartment. I didn't have roaches or bed bugs, but I was in this apartment with the reviews of that. It was not the best. I would say like it was the hood. Like, I lived in the hood. There was like gunshots and stuff. And I remember sitting on my couch one day and I wrote down a list. I was listening to Steve Harvey one day. He said, write down a list of things you want from God. Make it as detailed as possible. And I sat down and I wrote a list and I said, I want a high-rise apartment. At that time when I was working at United Wholesale Mortgage, I was making $16 an hour. No experience. I wrote down a high-rise apartment. I wanted a closet so big that I was able to walk in it. I wanted windows wrapped around my apartment. I wanted a Range Rover. I wanted to be able to afford to get my hair and my nails done when I can. Like, I had wrote down this very detailed list to God. And I remember I was like, this is so pointless. But I prayed about it. I prayed. And as soon as I prayed, that, like, I think that weekend I went and got Isaiah 60:22 tatted on me, which is when the time is right, God's going to make it happen. So I was still working at UWM. And so I was working there. I had got a tap on the shoulder and they said, underwriting is not for you. They said, you're not doing the best that you can. We want to offer you another position. Again, I was like, another position? Where's the other position? Like, what am I doing in this other position? And so they said they wanted to offer me a job which was below an underwriter. So I was going to make less money. So when I finished underwriting, I was supposed to be making $20. So I started at 16 and I was supposed to be making $20 an hour. When they tapped me on the shoulder and told me they had a different job opportunity because they didn't think underwriting was for me, the job opportunity they were offering me was $15.50. Straight out of college, $15. I didn't have a choice. I'm like, I have to make the money. Like, I have to do it. So I started working in a job below an underwriter. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but I started working there and I was doing that for about a year. And I was like, this ain't for me. I was going into work every day, stressed out. I would get in the office at like 10 and wouldn't leave till 8. I was always overwhelmed. I felt overworked. So I remember I applied to be on HR. I applied for the HR team and I was like, I ain't gonna get it. I ain't gonna get it. There's no way I'm gonna get this job on the HR team. And I applied. Time go by, the job posting goes down. I hadn't even interviewed. Then finally I get a call for an interview. So I interviewed for the job and like a week later I got hired in to start as an associate recruiter. So I was an associate underwriter recruiter. Again, I had wrote down this detailed list. I was doing that job, but that job offered me $16 an hour. So I was working hard day in, day out. And I had a terrible boss. When I say it was terrible, it was such a terrible, toxic environment. Very, very bad. I remember going into work and I just felt like she was pregnant. She hated me, our team, just had such a bad attitude. And one day I was watching this show called Insecure because I love the show called Insecure. And I was watching it. And I remember the scene of her quitting her job. And she was working on a nonprofit. She just walked out of her job. She said, I can't do this no more, and I quit. And I was laughing. I'm like, that's so stupid. Why would someone do that? So 2 weeks later, I had got home. My boss had like went off on me the day before. Basically told me she was not allowed, because I wanted to go for a promotion at the job. And she's like, I'm not letting you get a promotion. Like she's like, I just love you so much and I want you to stay on my team. I'm not giving you a promotion. I said, okay. So I remember I prayed to God. Again, here I go asking God when I'm going through difficult times. I'm not praying to him any other time. I'm only going to him when I'm having a difficult moment. And I said, God, if you want me to quit this job, just let me know. And something it was just like a feeling that came over me, like, quit your job. I had nothing backed up. I didn't know what was next. And I was like, you want me to quit my job? Like, and for me in that moment, it was like a chill. Like, I knew that I had to quit my job. I had to leave my job. But I didn't know what was next. So I remember I was like, oh, are you sure this is like something I want you to do? And it was just another chill. So I was like, okay. So I wrote the resignation letter. And I walked into my job and I told her I quit. And she said, okay. She didn't say, oh my God, please don't leave. She just said, okay, well, you can pack up your stuff and you can leave. So I knew at that moment that it didn't matter. I was a number to them. It didn't matter who I was, how great of an employee, how long I stayed at that job. What they cared about was numbers. And you were a number to them. You were like a machine, like a robot. Like, they didn't care about the person that you were. So then I went home and I was like, that was such a bad mistake. I have an apartment. I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, I'm just living in this apartment. I have no backup plan. I don't know how I'm going to pay my bills. Like, what's next for me? Like, I'm freaking out. Like, freaking out. I'm like, I should have never quit my job. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I'm sitting in my apartment, just quit my job, no income, no savings account. Nothing. So I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I remember I was crying. I was applying to jobs, and this had to be 2024, and crying every single day. Didn't know what I was gonna do, because I thought it was easy. Like, when I was in freshman year of high school, if I quit a job, I was able to find another job. After COVID, it's hard to find jobs. So in my mind, when I quit my job in 2024, I was like, oh, I'm just gonna be able to find a job right away. It was not like that. And I wrote, again, I was listening to Steve Harvey. He said, sometimes you have to just trust. You might not see what's at the end of that dark road, but you still got to go through it. Sometimes you got to go through it and see what the outcome is. And so I'm like, I don't know. When I was listening to him, I was like, I don't know. I don't trust this. I don't know what's next. Like, I don't know. So I'm sitting on my couch, and time had went by. I did not hear back from the job. Did not get a job. Weeks had go by. It was like the third week. Rent is coming up. Now I don't have the financial ability to pay my rent, because my mindset then was, oh, I don't have to save. I don't need to save. I can live paycheck to paycheck. And I remember crying. I had applied for a loan through my bank, because I was like, if I get a loan through my bank, then I'll be able to take that money and pay for my apartment. Denied. First coming up, I received my notice. Hi, Montasia. Rent's due. You're 4 days late. You gotta pay it, or we're gonna file an eviction notice. I'm sitting here looking at this letter. I started crying again. I got on my hands and knees and I said, God, if you get me out of this situation, I promise I am not gonna call on you when I'm going through hard times. I'm gonna call on you all the time. And I don't know. Something told me, just apply again. Apply for a credit card. My bank had denied me for a loan. So I was like, maybe they might give me a credit card. Like, I don't know. They said that you just was not a good candidate at this time for a loan. So I applied for a credit card, and I had got a credit card for just enough. It was literally just enough for me to pay my rent. It was not nothing more, nothing less. It was just enough for me to pay my rent. And I had got approved the day before they were supposed to file that eviction notice. And I remember crying. I was like, God, you got me out of this. Like, you made it. Like, you did it for me. Like, this is crazy. And I was so thankful. And I knew at that moment I had to find a church home. So I started exploring options, looking into a church home, things of that sort. But again, I still didn't have a job. So I didn't have food. I didn't have water. I didn't have none of that. Like, I was just in there with my rent paid. And I was so overwhelmed, so I started reaching out to different churches. And I had been going to this church in Southfield. I had been going there for years. And I think this is the first incident that I really stopped wanting to go to God, was after this incident. So he had seen me through that rent. He helped me get my rent and all of that situation. I was like really starving. I was hungry. I didn't feel like I had a really good enough. Like, I could have depended on my family, but I didn't like to, like, I'm very, like, my mindset is I don't like to depend on anybody. I want to be able to do things on my own because I want people to see that I'm being independent. So when I was going through my financial issues, I did not tell a soul. Everyone might have saw on Instagram, oh my gosh, she just has the perfect life. She's doing all this. But I was going through, I was drowning and drowning and drowning. So I had reached out to the local churches and I'm like, hey, like, I know that, not a local church, but the church that I was going to. I had been attending for about, I would say on and off for about a year. I had been attending this church and it was in Southfield, and I reached out to them and I said, hi, I'm just in need of financial assistance. I know that like last week on Sunday, you guys said that you guys could help people if they were in need. So I'm just reaching out saying that I just need at least $50 or $100, and no response. To this day, I actually never got a response back to them. And that was my tipping point with God. I said, okay, so you sat here and you paid my bills, but you're not going to give me food. You're not going to supply all my needs. You're going to pick and choose what you want to do for me. And I was like, I don't need people like that in my life. I don't need you. I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to obey you. Like, you're nobody important. You're obviously not showing up for me the way that you need to show up for me. So there's no reason for me to even keep praying to you or keep even talking to you. So I was done. At that point, I was so done. It's like, I'm not talking to God. I'm not coming to him. My dog didn't have dog food. I'm in here with nothing on my in my stomach, like nothing. I was mad. I was furious at God. And I was like, I'm just not praying no more. And the day goes on, and I get a message from somebody that says, please check your PayPal. And I was like, check your PayPal? This person has sent me $1,000, not because someone told them to, but because they said it was placed on their heart to just send me some money. I broke down in tears because I just sat here and screamed at God, telling him he didn't show up for me, he wouldn't show up for me, and he did. Maybe it wasn't the way that I wanted to. Maybe I wanted those churches to respond, but there's a reason they didn't respond. Maybe that was not the church home for me. Maybe that was God telling me that's not the church place that I want you to be at. But him making a way out of no way was just insane to me. Like, that was crazy. So I was like, oh my God, like, this is crazy. Like, someone sent me money. I'm like, I went grocery shopping. I got a whole bunch of food this day. I was so happy I was able to get food for my dogs. But I was like, this is crazy. Like, I called this person. I'm like, what made you? They were like, I don't know. Something was placed on my heart to send you this money. I don't know why I sent you this money, but it was just placed on my heart to do that. So I was like, okay, well, maybe God is listening to me. Like, maybe he is kind of listening to what I have to say. So, and then after that, I had to apologize. I'm like, all right, God, I'm sorry. Like, I shouldn't have said that what I said, but I was frustrated, which I know, like, from my knowledge is that, like, God knows. God knows when you're going to make a mistake. God knows when you don't mean any harm. So I knew that I had already been forgiven. That's what he died for, is for my sins. So I knew at that point that I had already been forgiven. So fast forward, I was still waiting. I still didn't have a job, and I found a job. It was not the best job. I got a job working at a cleaning company, and I worked in HR there. And I remember sitting there at the desk, and I was the only black person in the room, and it was always a black joke. Oh, where do you get your weave? Or what did you do this? And stuff like that. And I remember going home every day, and I had created that list. Like I said in the beginning, I had created that list, and I kept looking. I'm never gonna get no high rise. I ain't gonna never have no Range Rover. I'm never gonna, like, I just kept looking at the list going, there's no way. I went from making $15.50, then I started making $16 in HR. Now I'm making $16.25 at this cleaning company. And my job is to sit at a desk and call people all day to see if I can fill positions. Hated that job. And one day, I just happened to be on Google, and it was this listing posted for a nonprofit. I had zero experience, none at all. And the starting salary for that job was $45,000. And I said, well, that's like $22 an hour. So I was like, maybe I could apply. I was like, I'm just going to apply. Like, I'm not going to get the job, but I'm just going to apply anyways. So I applied at this nonprofit in Troy, Michigan. And I remember I got a call back. It was weeks later. I had forgot about applying for this job. I had been at this cleaning company for like 2 months at this point. I had even forgot I applied for that job. I thought I was going to be stuck at this cleaning company. But again, me being thinking little. When he thinks for you, he thinks big. You might not see the bigger picture at that time. It might have to be small steps. You might have to take a couple of leaps. But I was I didn't have no idea. So I applied for this job. I looked at the qualifications. It was so many things that I didn't have. So I was like, I'm not even going to get this job. But I applied anyways. And I applied for the job, interviewed, and then I had a second round of interview in person. And after I left that interview, HR lady told me, they all sat in that room and they said, she does not have not one qualification that we're looking for. And they said they had another candidate they wanted to go with. But something about me having a smile on my face and asking the right questions and being the person that I was, they offered me the job with no qualifications. None. Nothing that they were looking for. They were looking for marketing experience and a marketing degree. I didn't have any of that. I'm a criminal justice background major. I had nothing that they were looking for. Ended up working there, was there for about a year. And I was like, this ain't really the job. I don't know what's next. I said that to myself. I said, I don't know what's next. At this point, I had moved out of my apartment that I was in the hood, and I was living in Clarkston, Michigan, which it was still kind of raggedy, but it was a stepping stone for me. Again, I kept looking at my list, and I was like, I ain't gonna never get this high rise. I ain't gonna never get this stuff that I want. And so I remember being at the job, and my manager comes to me one day and she's like, Montasia, I just want to let you know that with all this stuff going on, because the new president had just been hired in, he started erasing a lot of policy. So she comes to me and she says, I want you to update your resume. And I said, oh my God, I can't go through this again. I cannot. I'm like, I just went through this. I didn't have a job for a month. I was struggling. Like, there's no way. She said, I just want you to update your resume and start applying. She said, not that we're going to lose anything, but because you need to do it just in case. Because of all these new policies that he's coming up with, he's taking away grants, he's taking away funding. You want to make sure that your job is secure. And even if your job is not secure, you want to make sure that you have a secure job. So I was like, oh my God, now here I go again. Now I'm finna have no money, nothing. So I applied. I was applying to so many different jobs. And so I found this job in Ypsilanti, Michigan called the Corner Health Center. And again, the qualification that he looked for, I didn't have not one qualification, and the salary was out of the world. I was like, ain't no way I'm gonna get this job. There's no way I'm gonna get this job. They had a salary that was so high that I was like, I didn't think that I deserved that salary. And on top of that, I didn't have the qualifications that they were looking for. But again, I was like, I'm gonna trust you, God. I'm gonna apply. So I applied, did not hear back for weeks. So then I was like, okay. I was at this job, and then I got a call from them, and they said they wanted to do a phone interview. So I did a phone screen with them, and they said they wanted to do a second round of interviews. So I'm going to take you guys back to a long time ago. So let's go back to my sorority days. When I was in my sororities, I went to this probate for a friend of mine, who's actually a friend of my cousin. They grew up together. And when I was at that probate, I was talking to a girl at that probate, and we had a great conversation. We laughed, we talked, we were like, oh my God, we gotta hang out after this. Fast forward, we never hung out, but we exchanged each other's social media accounts. Fast forward till 2024, and 2025, I was at a wedding. I went to a wedding for a friend of mine. And she was not a close friend of mine, but she invited me to her wedding. I went, again, this is the girl's brother. So the brother that I went to, it was her brother's wedding. Not her brother, it was his sister's wedding. So I went to the sister's wedding. So I'm at the wedding, and I saw this girl again that I saw at the probate. And she's like, hey, Sora. And I'm like, hey. And we talked for a little bit, but we didn't really talk. And that was kind of it. Fast forward to the Corner Health Center. I want to do this interview with the program manager. The program manager was that same girl I spoke to at that probate and at that wedding, which I thought was crazy. She said, when she saw my name, she said, this has to be God. This has to be God. I did not put two and two together. I saw her name and I was like, wait a minute, I think this is the girl I got on Instagram. But I immediately was like, me being arrogant, I was like, I gotta block this girl. Like, I don't want her seeing nothing I have on Instagram and being that determining factor of me. But something just told me, pause. Take a deep breath. Just relax. Like, it was like a pausing moment. That's what I did. I didn't block the girl. I was just like, it is what it is. If she does not accept me for who I am, this is not the job that's for me. Had my interview with her. Right off, she was like, it's so good to see you. Like, when I met you at that program, you had such great energy. Like, you were just shining. Like, you made me laugh. Like, we had a great conversation. Like, you were just such a great candidate. Well, not a candidate, but such a great person is what she said. So then I had my interview with all of these women in this room. And I was like, ain't no way I'm getting this job. Ain't no way. The salary too much, the qualifications, and then this woman knows me. She ain't giving me the job. Time goes on and I eventually get the job. And I prayed to God. I was like, there's no way. I went from making $16 an hour, $15.50, to this huge increase, which I didn't think I was deserving of, but God thought I was deserving of. So fast forward, I'm still in my apartment. And I was like, oh no, I gotta come closer to home. Like, there's no way. So I started looking and I was like, I'm not gonna, remember I made that list. I'm not gonna get no high rise. There's no way. I can't afford it. So I started looking and I looked and I looked and I applied for this apartment. And God aligns everything. Isaiah 60:22, when the time is right, God's gonna make it happen. So I found this apartment complex, pulled up to it. Didn't know how much it cost. Pulled up to it, and it was beautiful. And I said, oh my God. I walked into the apartment, did the tour, floor to ceiling windows. It was just one. It was a studio. It was a tiny apartment. It wasn't much in it. But I said, this is it. Applied for that apartment, got denied. So then I said, okay, I don't know what to do. I keep trying everything. It seems like I'm trying everything. I don't know. So God, I want you to lead the way. Something told me to call. So I called them and I said, hi, I'm just a little curious of why my application was denied. They looked it again and they said, oh, we don't know why you were denied. When can you move in? I dropped to my knees. What I thought had been a denial, God made a yes. There was no, it said denied, clear as day, denied. And they said, I don't know why that was denied. You're approved. Everything included in this apartment. And it was way less than I had been paying when I was living in that apartment in Clarkston and what I was paying when I lived in that apartment in Waterford. Way less. Got this apartment. A couple of days later, I just dropped to my knees and I was crying. I said, God, this is it. You got me the studio. And maybe it's not the high, it's a high rise. I'm on the 17th floor. I made that list. But again, when you think small, God's always got bigger plans for you. Sometimes you just have to wait. So I lived in my studio and a couple of months go by. And again, remember I wrote this list. I had this whole detailed list. I wanted a Range Rover. I can tell you to this day, I still ain't got no Range Rover. But again, God is making a way. And I remember having my car and my car blew out. A month into me being into this job. A month. I didn't have no car. So I prayed to God. I said, God, please. I don't know how you're going to do it. But I need a car. I didn't have no money. Because I had only been at this job for a month. And then you know sometimes you got to put your time in. And that first check you get is never as much as you think you're going to make. So you got to put some time in. So I put some time in. And my check was as little as can be. I didn't have no way. That's for it. The car that I had was a lease car. It was a lease car that I had. They told me that there was no way for me to get out of this lease. I was stuck for 2 whole years and I had just got that car. 2 whole years I was stuck and the car was broke down. So I prayed to God and I said, God, I don't know how you're going to get me out of this. I'm stuck in this lease. They said, well, there's nothing you can do. But God always has the final answer. Went to that dealership and I said, I can't afford it. I don't know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. I don't want this on my credit. This is going to impact my credit. Another lady who owned the dealership had came in there. She said, what's going on? Told her what was happening. She said, don't worry about it. Give us the car back. We'll call it a clean slate. And I, to this day, cannot tell you how that happened. Not on my credit. Never affected my credit, nothing like that. She said, we're going to call it. She said, that's something that I've never done before, but we're going to call it a clean slate. Do you need something in writing to say it? And I said, absolutely, because I don't want you to come back and say I came and got this car up. But I got something in writing, which I thought was crazy. Again, at that point, I ain't had no transportation. So my family was taking me back and forth. No money in my pocket. I had no money. No money. So I said, I know I can't get another lease. I don't want to get out a loan. I already owe the bank $1,000. I don't, because I owe from when I couldn't afford to pay my rent at that time. So I still owe them for that. There's no way they're going to give me a loan. I didn't already ask for a loan before I asked for a credit card. They told me no. So I was like, there's no way. Again, just prayed. I said, God, please make a way. I get a phone call from one of my family members. They said, hi, Montasia, how's everything going? I said, it's just going good. I got a lot. I've got this car. My car's having all these issues, things of that sort. They said, well, we got a Jeep Compass if you want to have it. It's paid off. You don't have to. All you got to do is come pick it up. It's yours. They took it to the dealership. They got it cleaned. They did everything that they needed to do for that car. And it was mine. And that's the car that I drive today. And you cannot tell me all of that I've been through, that was not God. So now I'm living the dream. I got a high-rise, a studio apartment, downtown Detroit, on the 17th floor. I got a Jeep Compass. I'm living the dream. Time goes on. I had been in the Jeep for a week, and I made the dumbest decision that I could ever make. I got behind the wheel, and I was intoxicated. And I remember I had been at EMU, drinking too much, decided I can get home. I can make it home. I was in Troy, Michigan, my meetest spot with my friends, and I said all I have to do is get from Troy to home. So I got in the car, very much drunk, drove up to a gas station. I said I am not going to make it. Drove up to the gas station, asked the clerk for help. He told me there was no way he could help me. So I said, okay, well, in my mind I'm thinking, well, I can just make it home. Got back in the car, driving up the street, got pulled over. He asked me had I been drinking, and with the common answer that everyone says is no. So I said, no, I have not been drinking. He said, well, you're slurring over your words. And I said, well, I'm nervous. He said, can you step out the vehicle for me? Again, second time my interaction with police. First time 7 years ago. That was 7 years ago when I got in trouble. So that's off my record now. But now this is again. Now I'm back in trouble with the law. He blows me, I blow. Over the legal limit. So he says, okay, you're going to jail. He took me to get a blood test, and I went to jail. I went to jail for a DUI. And I remember sitting in that jail cell, and I was with all these people. I was frustrated. I wasn't frustrated at God. I was frustrated at myself because I keep continuously putting myself in situations and then calling on God and asking him to get me out of the situation. And I know that he's going to be there, and I know he knows. Like, he already has my life made up. He has a story already told. So he knows what's going to happen before it happens. But I was just so frustrated with myself. I'm like, you have so much. God has blessed you with so much. Why would you even do something like this? So I sat there, and I sat there, and I sat there, and I eventually sobered up, and they let me go. And I got in the Uber and went home. Car impounded. At that point, I ain't had no car. I ain't had no Jeep no more. And I had to still Uber home. So instead of Ubering from Troy, Michigan home, which would have cost me $25, I had to Uber from a jail in Oakland County, Sterling Heights. And Sterling Heights, that was a $45, $50 charge. And my car was still impounded. And I didn't have a license at that point. So now they took my license. So I Ubered home, didn't know, had to call off work the next day. My grandma, luckily, she was able to give me some money, and I was able to go and get my car out. So I got my car out, and I'm freaking out. But I was like, it's not going to be on my record. Like, there's no way this is going to be on my record. My job is never going to find out about this. That's what I said. My job is never going to find out about it. Time goes on, and I had been working at a program, at an after-school program. And I had already did a background check in the summertime. So in my mind, I don't have to do a background check again because I had did it in the summertime. Week after my DUI, the school emails and they said, hey, we need everyone, since it's a new school year, we need everyone to do a background check again. I disclosed on my background that I had a DUI to them. I did not disclose it to my job. I did not tell my boss about the DUI. I disclosed it on the paper. So time was going on, and everyone had been approved to go into the school except for me. So my boss was like, why you haven't got approved? Why you haven't got approved? And I'm like, I don't know. Again, instead of being honest, I was lying. I said, I don't know. I don't know why I didn't get approved. Time is going on. Time is going on. And eventually, my director and HR knock on my door. And they say, can we talk? And I said, yep. And they said, do you know why we're here? And I said, yep. And they said, we're not going to fire you because we think that you're an excellent person and that you deserve to be here and that people make mistakes. And I was like, huh? Like, that was just like not what I pictured. Like, when I pictured that they were going to shut the door and tell me that this is my last day here. Because that's what most jobs would do. They said, we think that you're an excellent person. You're an excellent person for this job. We want to keep you. So how can we be supportive to you? Just went from a job at UWM where I had a manager who did not care whether or not I was there or not, to a manager who cares if I'm there all the time, who wants me to be there, which I was like, this is such a shocker. Like, this is crazy to me. So I said, I don't know. I said that the case had been dismissed. That was not the truth. The DUI was not dismissed. It was still pending. So I got home that same day and I wrote on my paper, case dismissed in Jesus' name. And I was going to these court dates every single month. Once a month I was going to these court dates. December was my first court date. The attorney says to me, we need to push this out. And I asked him why. He said, because you know, there's stuff that you need to fill out. So I did everything that he could. And then the second court date, he says, we need to push it out again because they're asking for more information. And I just kept praying. I said, God, I don't know how you're going to do this. I don't know when you're going to do this, but please dismiss this case in Jesus' name. Get to my third court date. I show up at 9 a.m. The attorney says, okay, we got everything that we need. We're going to give it to the city attorney. So then I'm crying because this is just crazy. So the city attorney, he comes back, court's over. I'm the last person still in the courtroom. The judge is like, well, just be patient. The attorney comes and he's like, the city attorney isn't here. So you can wait a week or you can wait and come back at 2 o'clock. And I said, I will just come back at 2 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, I'm sorry. I will just come back at 12 o'clock. So I came back at 12 o'clock and I'm sitting in the courtroom and everyone else's case is going. And I saw the judge, you get probation, you get probation, you get this, you pay this, you do this. Like, I was just there and I just kept praying. I put my head down and I was praying. I said, God, please, I trust you. I don't know how you're going to get me out of this. I don't know how you're going to get me out of this, but I trust you. So it's 3 o'clock. The court closes at 4 o'clock. 3:15. Everyone's still going. I'm the last person and the judge says, oh, you're the same person from this morning. And I say, yeah, I'm just being patient. My attorney comes in and he says, the city attorney wants to talk to you. He's never talked to anybody. So he wants to talk to you. And so I said, he wants to talk to me? Again, I had said that prayer, God, I don't know how you're going to get me out of this, but I trust you. I go into the room with the city attorney. He says, hi, Montasia. And I say, hi. And he says, you know, I never did this before. I've never wanted to talk to somebody that I was prosecuting. I said, yeah, well, I thank you. And he was like, tell me about yourself. Tell me about you. And I told him about what I did and who I was and that I believed in second chances. And I said, you know, I don't believe that I deserve for this to be dismissed. I don't believe I deserve to have a consequence. I absolutely deserve, because I could have killed somebody. I could have harmed myself. I could have hit a gas. Anything could have happened to me. Luckily, nothing happened. But anything could have happened if I wasn't pulled over. And he said, you're right. So what do you think that consequence should be? And I said, I don't know. I don't know what it looks like. And he said, do you believe in miracles? And I said, I believe that he's going to make a way. And he said, okay. So he said, does your job know about this? And I said, kinda. Not really, but kinda. He said, okay. So he said, let me talk with their attorney. And so he talks with my attorney, and my attorney comes to me and says, he's never done this before, but he's going to dismiss that DUI. And I said, what? He said, he's going to dismiss it. He said, oh, you're still going to do some stuff. I mean, you ain't getting off easily. You're still going to do driver's training, and you're still going to go to Alcohol Anonymous once a month. You're still going to take those precautions. But he said he has never done that before. But something placed it on his heart to do that for you. And I just was like, that's nothing but God. That's nothing but God. Week later, so I live in my apartment. This all is happening. I can finally get my job back. I can finally do what I'm doing. I'm so excited. I'm like, this is all going great. This is all going great. I look at my list. Things that I asked for. Work in my career field. I work in the criminal justice department in my career field. I wrote that list in 2023. Work in my career field. Get a high rise. I was living at the 17th. I said, floor to ceiling windows wrapped around the apartment is what I put on the list. It wasn't there yet. So I remember sitting in my apartment and I get a notification from my apartment complex. And they said, we want to show you this apartment. And I said, I can't afford no other apartment. I mean, it's getting a little pricey. Like I'm already paying not that much. I wasn't paying that much, but I was paying a lot for the apartment. And so I said, I really can't afford it. And they said, we just want to show it to you. So they showed me this apartment, and the entire apartment, windows wrapped around. And she said, you know what's funny is that every person has been denied for this apartment. She said, I don't know why we wanted to ask you if you wanted to see this apartment. I saw the apartment and I fell in love, but I was like, there's no way. My studio didn't have a dishwasher. It had a very tiny stove. It was very small. Everything was all in one room. So I said, this is going to be $2,000, $4,000, $3,000. It's going to be $1,500. It's going to be $1,400. I thought this price was going to be ridiculous. She told me it was only $20 more than what I was paying. And I started crying in the apartment. And I said, that is nobody but God. That is nobody but God. God has carried me through the worst times in my life. And when I did not see a way, He has always made a way for me. I cannot say that I am not a living proof of what God can do for you.
So at what point did you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior?
I think I've always accepted Him, but I didn't fully accept Him until I was sitting in that jail cell when I had got my first incident with the police. Is when I was sitting in that jail cell is when I really cried out to God and said, I want to change my life. I don't want to be that person. And that's when I went to church, Christian Love Fellowship, and I went in and I dedicated my life right after that to God.
And what would you say to the person who's listening who can identify with your story? What would you tell them?
Keep going. Keep going. It may seem bad. It may seem like a dark place. Like I've been there. I've been where it felt like nobody was there for you. You didn't have no support. I know what it feels like to feel like you're giving up. It don't see the end of the tunnel. You don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. All you see is darkness. Every day you're like, oh my God, this keeps happening. This is happening. This is happening. It's because God has a bigger plan. You just gotta keep going. Gotta keep fighting. You gotta keep going. Because I promise you, at the end of this, victory is going to be yours. You are going to make it to the end of the road. You might not see it, but you are going to get through whatever you're getting through.
How would you finish this sentence? If it had not been for Jesus?
If it had not been for God or not been for Jesus, I wouldn't be who I am. I would not be Montasia James. Because I am nothing without Him.
Any final words that you want to say to the listeners?
Well, I am very grateful for the opportunity to be able to share my story. Hopefully you guys can take something away from my story. Whether you are on the verge of believing, whether you don't believe, whether you don't understand, I think that when you have that relationship, no one can tell you what your relationship with God should look like. And I promise you, if you ask Him for something, He might not do it that same day. He might not come within that same hour, but He's coming. You just got to practice a little bit of patience.
Well, thank you for telling your story.
Yeah, thank you.